This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, 3-ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
The Chase Down podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract. There's no commitment. Try free at FuboTV.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers are a streaking gang. This is 7 in a row for the Cavaliers after a bit of a sloppy win against the San Antonio Spurs. And while Justin Rowan remains on vacation, you're still stuck with Carter Rodriguez here on hosting duties. But I am not alone. I would never subject you to 30 minutes of my rambling. So instead, we had to call in the big guns. My former boss at Fear the Sword, David Zavac. How you doing, Dave?
Real good. Thanks to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Things are good.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting stretch where we talked about it, that they had that kind of brutal January where schedule was hard. They were losing some games they should have won, and you start to wonder, like, hey, is this team ready? Because my evaluation was were better than what they showed in January, and if that were the case, they were going to make a run when the schedule softened up a little bit in the back half of the year. And it feels like they're kind of putting it together. What's your kind of analysis of where the team is as a whole right now?
It's kind of the team that we were promised by their first 10 games or so, right? I mean, they kind of started out the season by kind of getting this hint of what they can be. And actually, I think if you look at it, usually a team, believe it or not, their first 20 games or so is relatively indicative of how good they're going to be. You know, you come out of the season, you have energy, you're relatively healthy, and everybody goes through bumps and bruises. But lost their way a little bit. But I think playing at home has helped. But they're also just getting good play from both of their good players now. I mean, so I think, Garland was picking up Mitchell for a minute, and now tonight Mitchell was able to pick up Garland a little bit. So that was the vision, right? So it's fun to see.
Yeah, obviously we've talked privately, but and we'll dive into the Spurs game, though I think to some extent it was a bit of an academic victory in the end. But I do want to stay macro for a little bit with you, just because I've always loved kind of hearing your takes. You are the Eeyore of Cavs Twitter, but don't let it fool you, gang. He's not just a Debbie Downer. You have expectations, and you're really I've always trusted kind of your read of the game. What have you seen from the Darius Donovan pairing thus far in the season? Because I feel like it's come together faster than either of us would have expected.
Yeah. I'm like as big of a Darius Garland fan as you can find, right? So for him to be this age and to be ready to play with somebody like Donovan Mitchell, who's been to the playoffs, who takes a lot of shots, who's taken a lot of important shots. You and I talked before the season, I wasn't that worried about it because of Garland's makeup, because of his ability to pass, because of his ability to spot up. So when I've been frustrated this year, it's been because I like their players a lot. So I do hold them to a high standard. I think you're right. I think the expectations are high. And they are young. So, you're allowed to have a bad month. You're allowed to have 2 bad months. And I think to be as young as they are and to have responded the way that they have the last 7 games during this win streak, I think has been really good. And, I think big picture, they play a lot of lineups that don't have enough shooting for me. But you've pointed out they're scoring in the top 10 or so of the NBA. They're sort of making that trade-off, and it's paying off because they're the best defense in the NBA. What they did tonight at times when they were actually dialed in, I mean, was stifling. I think Jared Allen is just incredible. I think the last game, Evan Mobley was incredible. So I thought Isaac Okoro defensively tonight was really impressive. So they sacrifice some offense for defense, and when it works, it works. And certainly lately it hasn't been. So
yeah, I've made this comp a few times on the podcast, but I really do think as much as we might be loath to do it, I think you might want to look at the Cavaliers' friends and former rivals out west in the Warriors to see what it looks like to have two volume shooting 3-point guards and how they can kind of cover up a lot of non-shooting warts. Like the Warriors can play. They can win at a high level playing Iggy and Bogut and Draymond and these guys, and they've carved out 4 or 5. How many titles are they up to now? 4? It sounds like, I think 4. Either way, however many titles they have, they've carved out quite a few playing at least 2 non-shooters at all times, and often, a third one. So, I do feel like, and I think we have to give the coaching staff their flowers a little bit on, the kind of offense they're running too. Like, I think we can correctly quibble with the pace, and and not just the pace, not just running, but just getting into their sets quickly. But I do feel like they're running stuff that generates clean looks, and generates advantage for them.
They have good passers, right?
Yes.
So, they might be playing Karras or Rubio or Mobley or even Allen. They're all people who are plus passers for their position. So the ball movement is less of a concern. In terms of the smart criticisms that I see, they need to play faster. Right or wrong, I don't get as worked up about that. And the biggest reason for that is you can pick up the pace, and I think that works for you in the regular season. And I think, any analytics person will tell you, you want to play faster. And I think you made a really good point there. It's about getting into your sets. But you can play with more pace, but when you get to the playoffs, I see that almost as more of a mask than a solution, right? Because, you get to game 4 or 5 of a playoff series, I don't think you can just get out in transition. That's just not the way that it goes. So to your point, I think what the Cavs do have going for them is I do think they run good offense. I do think they have good passers. And I think even guys like LeVert and Rubio are willing to take shots, but they're only going to go as far as Mitchell and Garland take them, to your point, because I'm not sure the percentage that they're going to shoot on that. But the passing and the offense itself, I think you're right. I don't think there's a problem with that, and I'm not even worried about the pace, which I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, again, I do like them pushing when they can, just because it is an avenue to counter some of their half-court deficiencies, which is shooting. I just feel like everything about the Cavs right now, and this is such a reductionist statement, like obviously everything about the Cavs offense needs to be revolved around gaining an advantage. That's offense. But I think it's especially important for the Cavs because they don't just, because of the lineups they're playing, I don't think they just walk into sets with 3 guys that you just can't abandon no matter what. And I've talked about this quite a few times that yes, they have 2 great shooters on the floor at all times in Darius and Donnie, but one of those dudes almost always has the ball. So it's like, they aren't, you're not leveraging their off-ball gravity, 2 of their off-ball gravity at a time, unless you're playmaking out of the high post or relocating after a pick and roll in the short roll, which they do, but it's not like they're just not walking in with advantage. So any way that they can get it, when they do push the pace and get into their sets quickly and find themselves in a mismatch or a cross match, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. But I don't need them to run. I think that's I agree that's a bit of a misnomer.
Well, and they're going to stagger Mitchell and Donovan, or they're going to stagger Mitchell and Garland as well. So, I guess when I start worrying, it's you've got to line up like Mitchell LeVert, Rubio, Okoro, and Allen for a while tonight, or and it's like, okay, some of these guys are willing to shoot, but like, how good are they going to be at it? But again, they defend so well that you're talking about the number one defense in the NBA and the eighth or ninth offense, and that's not panic mode. That's just how are we looking to get better. And I think one thing that the Cavs do have too, they have room for internal growth over the season, right? So like Garland and Mitchell are going to keep getting a little bit better with each other. Evan Mobley, I think, is a pretty clear example of somebody who over the last month has found his place in the offense a little bit. I think they could still, I'd like to see Dean Wade get a little bit more integrated into the offense and just the team in general, because he's somebody that can make those shots. Reportedly another shooter might be, getting added to the team if he's healthy enough. So I think there are some avenues for them to continue to get better as the season goes on. And I think that's exciting too.
Yeah, to your insinuation, reportedly the Cavs have reports say that the Cavaliers might be adding Danny Green to the lineup in the near future. Obviously, an infusion of good vibes guy, an infusion of great shooting, catch and shoot in from the corners, which really matters, and a lot of veteran know-how. So, I think that kind of move is important if that does indeed happen for the Cavs. Officially, just in the sense that, to your point, they are relying on some guys who have shaky jump shots, and we see in the playoffs, and like we're moving into rich people problems territory with roster construction, right? Like, where you're going to have almost every great team has at least one or two dudes who were really good for them all year that just all of a sudden can't play in the postseason because of some matchup, because of a slump, because of whatever. And the coaching staff for whatever team that is just cannot afford to let them work through it because it's too high stakes. So more optionality, more experience in that rotation seems really important. I do want to talk a little bit about Evan Mobley, who continues to make 2 or 3 offensive moves a night over this winning streak, where I go, whoa, I didn't know you were ready to do that. We were talking, you came to, was it the home opener you came to with us?
Yep.
I couldn't remember if it was that or the next one, but you came to the home opener with Justin and I, and we were talking about about Mobley, and I feel like you were one of the people who were trying to keep like expectations a little reined in offensively, like not pessimistically at all, but just like people are just throwing out, reckless comps, myself included. What have you seen? Has his recent stretch of offense and kind of the tools he's developed, is he starting to make you amend your expectations for him offensively?
Well, I'll start by saying, I first had to amend my expectations for him defensively, and that happened within the first 2 weeks of the season last year, right? Like, yeah. I'm just not prepared for 20, and now he's 21. I'm not prepared for 21-year-olds to defend the way that he does. And so that was the immediate adjustment that I had to make. For this year with his defense, I think people recognize it now, but I don't think we realized what Garland and Mitchell would mean for him, right? Like, I think there were a lack of shots for him the first 2 months of the season, where he was trying to piece together his role. I think you're seeing more of him against second units now, where he's playing with one of Garland or Mitchell, and it gets to be a little bit more of a focal point. He's been able to pass from the get-go. His basketball IQ is off the charts. So, yeah, I don't know where it's going. He's he's still not really shooting. I would rather he just shot all the time more. And I don't really care if he makes them or not. I just want to see him just continue to push himself and stretch himself. But again, he's 21. By the time he's 24, I just can't imagine that it's going to be a problem, right?
To that point, David, in December, he averaged 9.6 field goals a game, field goal attempts, 9.6. In January, he averaged 13.1. This month, he's averaging 14.5. So he is finding ways to kind of juice his shots, even if it's not up to like the 17 a game you might want to see.
And I'm giving JB credit for that too, right? Because that's where, I'm not willing to say JB's been perfect all season necessarily, but he's finding lineups where Evan can make this little jump. And I think JB deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I think Evan's just getting a little bit more comfortable with this skill game too, with his footwork. I've talked a lot about how I feel like Evan had like the inverse journey of a lot of prospects these days, where they come in with a really well-developed skill set. They can shoot, they can handle, but they don't know how to think the game yet. Evan was an elite thinker of the game, and though he's demonstrated some skill, like watching it, you can see that the pieces, they're not at an NBA, face up and get you a bucket level, which is completely fine. But I feel like we've been seeing it more and more, like his attacks in transition, where he's Euro stepping to the hoop. He hit the little hezzy on Daniel Gafford again in the Washington game, and I wish he had made that dunk. I do feel like he's starting to show a comfort level, and he kind of knows where his shots are coming from. I felt like earlier in the year, it was a lot of like stumbling into someone's chest offense. He was still helpful and great on duck-ins and things like that, but as a primary creator, I feel like he is generating positive angles for himself offensively.
And tonight was maybe his first. I'm not going to sit here and call a random February night game a step back, but he had 15 and 10 tonight. It's kind of the worst game he's had offensively in a while. I'll take that. So I agree, and I think it's a fine line between being decisive and being out of control. He's been really good lately at being decisive and making quick reads. I give maybe Pop a little bit of credit for kind of having his team, ready for some of that tonight. But no, he's too smart and athletic to not sort of slowly. I don't think it'll ever be as fast as maybe some people want it to, but in 18 months, I think we're going to really enjoy having Evan Mobley. I think we already are, but I think he's going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, he is really developing, and one thing that's already developed is the video conference software that this podcast uses. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. David, let's talk a little bit about this Spurs game. We haven't really talked about the game because, it is somewhat of an academic game. We know that this team, JB talked after the game, clearly not super thrilled with his team's level of focus. It was kind of, but I will say, I would certainly classify the team's focus as being a little screw to paraphrase our favorite South Park shop teacher. A little screwing around from the Cavaliers, not playing with that killer instinct all game. But I did watch the game think it's nice to have someone who can drop a casual 40. And he's not even working that hard to get there, right? Donnie is really on the uptick after, a rough stretch of games after that groin injury.
Yeah, I think, we were kind of, you win a game against the Bulls that I think some people thought, if they were going to have a letdown, tired game, it would have been that Bulls game. Then you've got this upcoming game on Wednesday night against the 76ers, which in some ways, could be the game of the season up to this point. I told you before the game, I thought it was kind of a letdown game, but they were still favored by 15. So I'm like, well, what do I know? And then they came out on fire and playing with a ton of energy. And I think the Spurs had like 12 points with 3 minutes left in the first quarter. But to JB's point, I think they lost some interest at halftime and were not particularly serious in the second half. But, there was a period in the fourth quarter where Garland was on the bench. And as you said, Mitchell kind of willed them forward a little bit. The Cavs kept getting to the free throw line, which, again, you're taking it to them, right? You're driving, you're forcing the action, and I think that is the nice thing about Mitchell is that he's going to take the threes. He's a very efficient player because he takes the threes, but he also is never going to settle. He's an attacking player, and I think that's helpful from a mindset perspective for the team that they have that. You mentioned the Warriors earlier, right? Like, the Warriors had that not with a guard driving to the basket. They had that with Draymond, right? So they've got these guards that can light it up from anywhere. And Steph got to the basket. There's always kind of a misnomer that he didn't, but it was Draymond who'd be sort of rolling downhill and making those short read passes and playing with the energy. That's Mitchell for us. And I think tonight was a game that I think you feel good about. That's why you traded for him.
Yeah, it's he applies straight line rim pressure. I don't really think anyone else on this team fits that bill. And like, of course, that's like one of the hardest skills to have is to be able to just burst to the hoop. And obviously he adds a lot of craft and when he needs to, he can do that that kind of carryover move to switch hands and kind of avoid reaching defenders, but like he applies that pressure, and I just feel like he was that calming presence for them, and he is showing that he's looking a lot more explosive, a lot more comfortable after a rough few games. I do feel like he was hitting to the point where it was like there were just some games where it was like 75% of Donnie's field goal attempts are pull up threes, and it's like that's just like. There is a point of diminishing returns where you do need him to attack. Everyone else is so craft based. Darius gets the rim, but he takes it's a lot of work to get there most of the time. Karras, same, a lot of work, a lot of torque, a lot of pivots and stops and starts, and the fact that Donnie just kind of can go straight to it and just destabilize a defense with within a second. That is a really important skill to demonstrate. So it feels really, really good to see. And it's just kind of nice watching him come back because we were talking. I really feel like Darius has been the best best player on the team for the past 6 weeks. So the fact that Darius can come out and kind of have a stinker tonight, like I think he played unfocused basketball. And just was not sharp whatsoever. Had 6 turnovers, 0 for 4 from 3, and the fact that Donnie can just insulate you from a night like that, it feels really, really good. And I just feel like this team right now, they might not have a ton of stylistic diversity right now, but they do have a lot of ways to win games.
Yeah, and I mean, JB can be mad or say that he's mad and whatever. They've won 7 games in a row. Like, there was never a real moment in this game where I was particularly worried, right? Like, yeah. I think it was pretty clear that the Cavs always kind of had another gear that they could get to. Now, sometimes you take your foot off the gas and you can't put it back on. So, did they make things a little bit more dramatic than they needed to be? Sure, but I don't think like by tomorrow, JB is still gonna, be mad. I think he kind of has to put on this front tonight, like, hey, but like he'll go home and feel good about, the position they put themselves heading into this Sixers game, I think. But
yeah, and like I do think ultimately, you can quibble with this win streak insofar as the competition has been pretty marginal. The Grizzlies, were really the only great win on this in this streak, but this is exactly what they weren't doing in January. They were losing almost every schedule loss. They were dropping. They dropped that game. I think it was against the Spurs where they had 2 days rest. And it's like, man, you just can't drop those if you want to have home court in this conference, which is really, really challenging. You can't lose these games. Like, you have to win games that you are at a disadvantage during. And I feel like the Cavs had that. Like, that Bulls win, I know the Bulls are a mess right now. I really think it was one of the most encouraging wins of the season because they won that game not on the backs of a hot shooting night, or they just had to work their asses off to get back in that game. And like, even in the fourth quarter when they were going on their run, there was that possession where Ricky bricked a three, and then they got an offensive rebound, and then Darius bricked a three, and then they got another offensive rebound, and then they threw it away. And like, those are the kind of things like the universe was not in their favor on that night, and they still, basically broke the Bulls. And I feel like that is a sign of a team that's starting to mature a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I think you're exactly right. They're taking care of business in ways that they weren't doing not so long ago. I don't know if that Heat loss was a wake-up call. It honestly might have been a wake-up call for, some of the rotations and that sort of thing. I think there have been some subtle changes. You've gotten Dean Wade back. You're not really using him, but I think it gives another option, right? I think quietly, he only played 11 minutes tonight, but I think Chetty Osman's been a more consistent piece of the rotation. There's been less Lamar Stevens, So I think I think JB, they're tinkering less, and they're approaching things a little bit more seriously. And, one of the really positive things I think is that as they've stopped tinkering, to your point earlier about, hey, some guys you just can't play them if they're working through things. I mean, Isaac Okoro has sort of taken himself out of that conversation. I mean, he's really asserted himself in the top 8, you got to play him. I thought, one of the sort of hypotheticals, that I was thinking about really even a year ago is, okay, let's say Isaac's offensive game doesn't come around. How good would he have to be defensively to justify the kind of minutes that he's getting?
I remember this exercise very well.
And I don't know. I'm not a defensive analyst. I never coached, it's hard for me to say. But I just watching tonight and what he's been doing really for the last couple of months, he's defending at a level, by my eye, that justifies, at least him being in the rotation. And I still want him to shoot more. And I think he's getting more confident. Only took 4 shots today. I want him to shoot more. But I do think he's asserting himself as a rotation player, and not putting a lot of pressure on somebody else to replace him in the starting lineup either. So I think you have to feel really good about that too.
Yeah, I think I've said this a few times about Isaac, but it's so funny that I feel like he's a player where you just really can't box score watch, because early in the season, a 5-2-1 game might have looked like a freaking nightmare. I really think he was lost on the court earlier in the season. And, it's really easy to say Isaac's figured it out when he's scoring 20 against the Pacers on 7-9 shooting and goes 3 or 4 from 3. I feel like a night like tonight, to your point, where he's plus 14 in 37 minutes and he only scores 5 points. I feel like this, in a weird way, a game like this almost indicates that he's back and comfortable more than one of those outlier shooting nights. And it's not like, go ahead.
For me, when I'm going to be excited is when he goes 4 of 9 because that's going to mean that he took 9 shots, even though he wasn't making them, and he felt comfortable and he kept shooting. Like 7 of 9, like, okay, he was making them, so he kept going. No, I want 9 shots. I don't care if they're going in. That's when I'm going to feel good.
That's fair. And he has had some quieter outings as of late. 7, 7, 7, and 5 points in the last 4 games. And Chicago, no one could score, so he went 3 of 9 in that one. But yeah, I've been really, really impressed by him. By the way, it felt really unfair that Devontae Graham was their crunch time scorer for San Antonio tonight, and then we got to throw Isaac Okoro on him. It's like, oh, come on. Like, this guy's supposed to be a microwave off the bench for a team, and then he has to go face Isaac Okoro. Very unfair. But yeah, it's been really fun. It's been fun seeing Okoro figure it out. I kind of thought, I don't know about you, I kind of thought Dean would be putting a little more pressure on that spot, and I feel like Isaac has really locked it down.
I will say, you and I were talking a couple months ago, and we were kind of speculating about who would be in the rotation or who wouldn't be. And I just think JB loves Okoro way too much to ever really. I mean, I'll believe. You know what? He's just played, and you know what? Like I said, he's justifying the faith at the moment. So I'll give it to him, but. No.
In fairness to our beloved head coach, he had games of 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 minutes, and 6 minutes in the first 10 of the season. So JB was calling it like he saw it when Isaac was going through it at its worst. In his defense,
fair enough.
So, but I do feel like I did like your comment, by the way. I don't really have a discussion to make out of this. But I did really like your comment about how you do kind of sense the idea that JB's not doing so much tinkering right now. It feels like he knows exactly what he wants to do every night. At the expense of guys like Kevin Love and sometimes Dean or sometimes Jetty. But I feel like the rotations have a lot of purpose behind them right now.
Yeah, I'm not even saying I agree with all of it all the time. I think if they're able to bring in, a reported shooter, I think that'll make things interesting. But and then part of that probably leads into why he's frustrated tonight, right? Like JB is now bringing a level of seriousness to this, and he wants to see that from his team, and that's fair.
Yeah. Let's dive into some good old-fashioned standings watch, Dave. With the win tonight, and with the Nets catching an L to the Knicks, the Cavs are now up 3.5 on the 5 seed. They're up 5 on the 6 seed. What's your level of confidence that this team is going to be hosting a home court playoff series in the first round?
Very high. If they aren't, something happened. Tankathon has them as the 23rd toughest schedule left. I think it was 30th before tonight. The Spurs are not a very good team, so it's they have the 23rd hardest schedule left, or so they've still got a relatively easy schedule left, and the team with the hardest schedule is the Philadelphia 76ers, who are currently the 3rd seed. So right now I'm thinking 3rd seed. So if I have to start worrying about the 5th seed, I will. But right now, I think the team's playing well enough that I'm not worried about the 5th seed at the moment. And I think Wednesday will be really fun. I think it's not a measuring stick game. Like, if they lose, I'm not going to say the sky's falling, because it's not. But I just think it's an opportunity, and you hope that they take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we can dive into that game. They do head to Philly to end the pre-All-Star break part of their season. They're up 1-0 in the season series right now. Blew out Philly in that great game where they denied the hell out of Joel Embiid, and made his life really, really hard. Philly only scored 85 points in that game. My goodness. It does feel like a really important one. You know, you clinch that tiebreaker and tie yourself for the 3 seed with Philly having, you know, one of the, you know, the hardest schedule remaining. I've read this upcoming stretch on the pod before. I'll read it again in case you missed it. Philly's next 6-7 games versus Cleveland, All-Star break, versus Memphis, versus Boston, versus Miami, at Dallas, at Milwaukee. That is I think that's the hardest stretch of schedule I've seen all season. And the Cavs really have an opportunity to make up ground. Yes, Cavs play Denver and Atlanta on a back-to-back at the end after the All-Star break, but it gets easy again right after that. Like the Cavs are really, really well poised here.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to your point, the Nets and Heat both lost tonight. So, I mean, even taking care of business tonight is a big deal. You know, I think the Cavs are going to be in a good position to try and fight for that 3rd seed, but you know, assuring a home playoff series is exciting too. And you know, I think again the Cavs themselves have played to a level where we should expect things from them. I mean, I think I don't think we get to say, oh, Darius Garland should have been in the All-Star game with Donovan Mitchell. We have the best backcourt in the NBA. But then also be like, you know,
whatever happens,
okay,
happens.
Right? Yeah, I just think we can't have it both ways, but I think that's good. I don't think it needs to be seen in a negative way, like, oh, well, we better get to the second round or else people fail. No, that's not what it's about. It's about, I want to turn on my game and feel like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell can beat anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's about. So,
and I'll say this, I've said it multiple times. The 3 seed now really, really is meaningful in the East. You know, it's the difference between playing a Miami team that's coming on, that's battle tested. Like, I think a lot of people, if the Cavs played Miami in a series, I think I would pick the Cavs, but I think a lot of people would you know, give the nod to a battle tested team that gets to shorten their rotation in the postseason. That, you know, maybe doesn't quite have the depth right now, and is playing 1 or 2 players that, you know, aren't up to snuff to get through the regular season. The 3 seed means you probably get Brooklyn or the Knicks. You know, like those are the kind of matchups you should be, like, the Cavs would be heavily favored to win. And, you know, coming into a slugfest against either Milwaukee or Boston, you know, having already been blooded in battle a little bit, just seems really, really important for this team, because those 2 teams are so good. And, you know, and that's the thing, like, you would think that the Cavs might be gaining ground on even the 2 seed, but Milwaukee's won 10 in a row. Boston's won 4 in a row. The East is just bananas, man.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, that and on one hand, the East is really good, and it has been, you know, loading up for a couple years. On the other hand, I don't know that anybody is really good, right? Like,
oh, I think Milwaukee is really good. I think they are a great team.
Well, you know, if you look at the net ratings and that sort of thing, I don't, you know, they're not.
The numbers do not agree with me.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's right to respect them. So, that being said, I think, you know, you get to some of those teams, I think we have a puncher's chance. I'm less worried about, like, playoff experience, and I'm just more worried about, okay, it slows down. We're in a half-court offense. Do we
score enough?
And that's probably what I worry about, but we're not there yet. So
yeah, I'm actually just getting really excited. I think ultimately, and this is a little bit of a spicy take, I think Milwaukee, I have appropriate fear of Milwaukee because of the fact that I'm so sure that Giannis is the best player in the world. And Justin's mentioned this a few times. Like, we know what it's like to have the best player in the series by a country mile as Cavs fans, and how many good teams crumble when they go up against that. And I do think that is, like, if you really like were to give me truth serum, that's an anxiety I have about this team right now, which is like, we might have 4 top 50 players. When it comes to it, like, are we going to be able to go blow for blow when you're up against a Giannis who is just, one of the most I think the adjective I'd use to describe him is relentless. He just keeps coming at you over and over and over again, and it's this battle of attrition. And by the way, I don't fear Jason Tatum like I fear Giannis. I don't fear Embiid like I fear Giannis. Like, I feel like that's why I'd rather play anyone but Milwaukee as long as I can, to see if anyone else can knock them off. But like, that, I think, is like what I'm interested in seeing solved for this team. And if they're not good enough this year, I mean, I think we all expect them not to be good enough this year to win a title or anything. But like, starting to gather those data points that we just legitimately don't have is really, really exciting to me. I'm getting so hyped for playoff basketball. It's really not that far away.
Yeah, my actually answer was going to be, we don't have the data. I don't know. I mean, it'd be very interesting to find out. How helpful is Evan Mobley in a series against Milwaukee? How helpful is Isaac Okoro in any of it'll be interesting and fun to learn. And we had the play-in last year, but it's been a little while since we've got to have games of that magnitude. Which, sorry to keep going back to Wednesday, but that makes Wednesday night fun too, right? I think if the team thinks about it the right way, I just think it could be a cool atmosphere, and I'm looking forward to meaningful basketball.
Yeah, and it's a game where I think both teams are going to be up for it. Philly's been chewing through an easy part of their schedule too, and I think that both these teams are really going to go at each other. I think that I'm really interested to see if the Cavs go back to that hard trap, hard show, ball denial defense, where they were able to use Evan as a roamer, they were able to use Jared as a roamer. It's going to be really interesting to see if those strategies hold, or if Philly has some legitimate counters.
Well, and just thinking about like the playoffs too, right? Like, I think the way that the Cavs play is uniquely set up to be, for their defense to keep up in the playoffs, right? I mean, when everything slows down and you've got all that length with Mobley and Allen, there were a couple times even just, the Spurs are trying to make cross-court passes and they end up throwing the ball out of bounds because, Mobley's arms are crazy. And even if Okoro doesn't have the length, he's still just bothering you. So we don't have a ton of length on the wing and with our guards, but I do think just in terms of stopping shots at the rim, I think we have a lot of things going for us.
It's a good ass team, and I'm really, really excited to see them get tested in more and more high leverage situations. But David, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Faithful Chase Down listeners, please follow David on Twitter. He's no longer the editor of Fear the Sword, but he's always the editor in my heart. Sorry, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on, man. And thank you to the listeners. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please subscribe to the Cavaliers YouTube channel. Hit that upvote. If you're listening on audio, please subscribe, unsubscribe, and resubscribe and help cook those books. It's going to be a big one on Wednesday, gang. I'm really, really excited. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, go Cavs.